Hello everyone, and welcome to Chapter 14, Introduction to Swing Components. So we're going to talk about, let's see here. All right, objectives. We're going to understand swing components. We're going to talk about JFrame Class, JLabel, the use of Layout Manager, and extend the JFrame class. So you notice everything starts with J for Java. So these are your swing components, your forms. So some of the other exercises that we've already gone through, it's all been more terminal. It looks like it's back-end source code. But when dealing with Java Swing, you're talking about a form of Java. So you may go to the doctor's office and you may see a lot of times they're on some type of screen. But more likely nowadays it's all web-based. But however, some offices prefer to go the Java format where it's a form application versus a web application, and there's some benefits and some areas that probably doesn't benefit, but we'll talk about those later on. So these are some of the things that we're going to talk about, and these might be also some things that you talked about in CIT130, but I'm not sure. The other thing is JTextFields, JButtons, and tooltips to JFrame. So we'll get into some advanced features of Swing, but right now I just wanted to kind of do like an introduction to this, even though it may have been in your CIT 111. So it'll be more of a refresher, if anything. Learn about event-driven programming, understand Swing event listeners, the use of checkbox, button groups, and JCombo boxes, GUI components, button text fields, and other components with which the user can interact. Swing components are descendants of the J component. We'll talk about different classes that you can inherit, such as the container class, the ability to take advantage of Swing components using the import.javax.swing library at the beginning of your program. So container, what is a container? So it's a type of component that holds other components, allows a group to be treated as a single entity. Defined in a class often takes the form of a window that you can drag, resize, minimize, or restore. So with that in mind, okay, so I'm pulling my sketch pad here. So when we're talking about containers, let's think about if we draw, let's see if I can draw something here. We draw a box, right? Not a perfect box. So this right here is a container, and it holds information. So in this container, what can be in this container? We can have, excuse me, I apologize for that. In the container, we can have different components. So for example, I'll type in, we could have, let's just think of something specific. Wow, toys. Okay, kids' toys. What kind of toys can we have in that container? We could have Matchbox cars. We could have wrestling figures, starting lineups, balls like basketball, etc. So all these things right here can hold different types of toys. So as we sit here, we'll put one here. We'll say this is, for example, this is a baseball bat. All right, so that's a toy. We may also have, let's see, what else can we have in there? Barbie doll. Okay, so now we have a Barbie doll, a baseball bat, and so forth. You get the idea. A container is something that holds information. So it holds your objects in this example. All right, so and it allows you to drag, resize, minimize, and restore and close. Window class is a child of container. It does not have the title bars or the borders. It is rarely used. Instead, you would use the following classes, JFrame or frame, and JFrame would be something that you would see very often. The relationship of a JFrame class and its ancestors start right here. So you see it goes from the lowest level of detail up to the highest level of detail. Within it, create a JFrame so you can place other objects within the display. So you have the JFrame class as 4 constructors. So remember these. You might see these on a midterm or something like that. You have the JFrame string title. So that's the title of your bar. So if you're designing an application, like for example, say you go to a website, could be a perfect example is like this website right here. This might be a bad example, so let me actually go somewhere else. Let's go to Yahoo. All right. So as you see here, Yahoo is a search engine, but it has the title of the page up here. So it's it's Yahoo. That would be your title. So that would be kind of like your form. We can even let's go to Google. See if we can download something. Example of Java swing form. So we just go to images here and get some type of example. There we go. This is perfect. Let's see if we can make this bigger. All right, perfect. So in this example that I pulled up here, this right here would be your title information. So it is stating that, hey, you know what? JFrame has 4 constructors. Here's your frame right here with the title. This would be your title information. Another one would be a graphics configuration. Allows you to put graphics in there. Allows you to put an icon in there. Talked about and so forth. So that kind of gives you somewhat of an example. Here's other methods. You have the different methods. You have void set title string. So sets the JFrame title using string argument. So you would have something set title, and that would be the value that you would put in the option at the top. Here's the other one, void set size. You set the size of the frame, the dimension. So you have two. C has 2 arguments. The width. So anything has a height and width. So that would be in there. You have your get title in case you need to return the title. Boolean means true or false. Is it resizable? Set visible. Once again, true or false. Are you setting something visible? Yes or no, etc. So using JFrame class, create JFrame. So if you're going to create a new frame, it would be JFrame, the name of your frame, whatever value you want to call it. It doesn't have to be called first frame. It could be called anything that you want to be called. All right, so we have JFrame first name. You can name that whatever you want to. We call that my name if you want to call it. You call it whatever you want to call it. That's up to you. Equals new JFrame. So when you're declaring a class, creating a new frame, you have to call it this way. You can't just say JFrame, okay, we're calling it JFrame, my name equals something. You can't do that. You have to do equals new, what type of object? JFrame. And down the line, you'll learn other ones that you do the same with. And then you'll put hello, your message in there. So now, well, let's go back to first frame. So as you see here, we call it first frame. So now when you type in first frame dot, you'll get all those options that we talked about back here. Set title, set size, get title, etc. Those are all options as a part of your object now, because you're using the JFrame class, and anything that comes with the JFrame class will be part of that variable that you use. So now it'll make it easier for you to see first name frame dot blah, first frame dot set title blah, and so forth. Hopefully that makes sense. So here's an example of we're importing the java.swing and all of its components. Now, if we don't do this right here, then what we're trying to accomplish right here is not going to work. So we'll go over these demonstrations in our lecture, in our lab work. These will be examples that we'll go through and see what happens if we do certain things. So we'll talk about that in the lab. To close JFrame, click the close button. The default behavior, JFrame becomes hidden and the application keeps running. So to change this behavior, you use set default close operation method. And we'll use those in our examples and see what happens if you don't use them and what you do. And that's the only way that you really learn. Actually, I just went backwards, didn't I? Let's see here. All right, window decorations, icons and buttons. So those would be any icons you see, like for example, if we went back to this icon right here, that's an icon. So that would be in your window decorations. Look and feel, the default appearance and behavior of a user interface. The set default look and feel decorated. method sets the JFrame's look and feel. Import swing. So it's just giving an example here that it's doing this. I would kind of recommend when you're walking through the lecture, maybe pull up your Eclipse swing and start typing some of these examples in and seeing what happens on the screen. And maybe taking some things out and seeing what happens, just to kind of get a feel of how this all works. Let's talk about the JLabel. Let's move on. JLabel holds text you can display. It has available constructors and methods. So you have the method add, remove, set text, and get text. So basically, when you're talking about adding, you're allowing that, eventually you're allowing that method to be added. So let's say that we created a JLabel, right? And let's say that hypothetically, and we'll show in our example in the lab, let's say that we didn't do add. What do you think happens? Well, we won't add the label. So you might declare at the top, you might say JLabel my font equals new JLabel blah, and then you close the tag, and then at the bottom, if you don't do JLabel, whatever the name of your label is, my font dot add JLabel, that method won't be called, and what happens is your message won't be displayed. Remove is just what you think it is. It removes it. Set text and get text, same thing. Set text allows you to set a variable text, and get text allows you to get variable. Font class creates an object that holds typeface and size information. To construct a font object, you need 3 arguments. Typeface, which is what type is it? Is it Times New Roman? Is it Arial? Is it Comic Sans, etc.? Style, what type of style you want, and the size of it. Maybe I got that wrong. Style is like your Courier, your Arial, etc. Typeface would be a different declaration of it, such as bold, italics, so forth. Set font method. A font object argument is required. So here, an example here, we're importing these 2 libraries. We're setting up our frame width and height. Let's see here, JFrame set size, the width and height. You see where it's using A frame is our JFrame, because this JFrame is our object and A frame is the name of the object. And so when we A frame, we set size, we set visible to true, which means hey, let's see it. We say set the default close operation, exit on close. So once they click the exit button, it's gone. Have a good day. Now on the label here, it's as you see, this is what I was talking about. So it's called JLabel greeting equals new JLabel good day. So it says the variable is called greeting, and this is the object is greeting, and this is the value in it. It's called good day. It could be anything. So now we use this object greeting dot set font headline font is going to use, and then here's the add part I was talking about. So now we take JFrame. So we're talking about the frame, which is our important object. We're saying, hey, in this frame we want to add what? Greeting, which greeting goes to label. But let's say that we didn't do this, and in our lab we're going to not do this and see what happens. It won't work. So we'll talk about that more often. More on layout manager, a class that controls component positioning, border layout, a normal default behavior of a JFrame, divides a container into regions. Flow layout manager. When you create a class that descends from the JFrame class, you can set the JFrame's properties with your object constructor. Then, when the JFrame child object is created, it is automatically endowed with the features you specify. Create a child class using the keyword extends. Call the superclass constructor method using the super. So this right here is just an example of stuff we've already talked about, so I'm going to skip that. In addition to JLabel objects, JFrames, there's also JTextFields, JButtons, and tooltips. So who here thinks they know what a tooltip is? So a tooltip will be, we'll go back to my example here. A tooltip is if I hovered over this and something popped up, then that means that it's being used as a tooltip. It gives me like a, it'll say, let me actually find an example of a tooltip. I don't have any. All right, perfect. Here's an excellent tooltip. So, in this one right here, let's view image. All right, so in this example here, I hover over a button, but it uses a button component. That right here is a tooltip. So you give the user the ability to have a tip. So let's say they had a text box they wanted to fill out, and you could hover over and say required. And then if they go to hit submit and they don't have it in there, you can have a nice little pretty message that comes up and says, you know, frame that text field was a requirement. So JTextField is a component into which a user can type a single line of text data. They have several constructors. Same thing with the methods: setText, getText, setEnabled method, which is this right here is true or false. JButton, click a mouse, that makes a selection. Has 5 constructors. Methods include setText, getText, add method, stuff that we've already talked about. Adds a JButton to the JFrame. So we getting back to the JFrame, say it's called A-frame. And what are we going to do? We're going to add A-frame.add, and then we're going to have the name of that JButton, whatever it's called. We'll say my button, and adds it to its container. So think of it, we go back to the toy box. So we have the toy box, and the toy box has toys in it. So let's say that Sally wants to add a Barbie doll to it. And let's say mom says, Sally, let's put this Barbie doll in here. And she says, I don't want to add it, Mom. Well, guess what happens? That's the same example as if we forgot to put the add here. But if Sally says, okay, Mom, I want to go ahead and add it, guess what? Now we're using that object. We're saying, okay, we want to use it. We want to add it. So just think of it that way, if that helps clarify what you're thinking. Tooltips, we just talked about what they look like, how you can set them, and we'll go over those examples in a demo in our lab work. An event. An event is whatever you think it is. It occurs when a user takes an action on a component, such as clicking a mouse on a JButton object. So an event in real life would be, I don't know, going to a concert, going to a sporting event, anything like that, going to your child's soccer game, basketball game, football game. Those are all events. Those are things that are going to happen. So an event in here is when you click a button, something happens. So like if I went out to the website, or I'll go to any website, let's say we go to Google and we want to search on something. Let's say that we type in MLB wildcard. Okay. All right. So now I can hit enter on my board, but let's say I click on this right here. It brings up an action event. So it brings up an action of the standings. So that is an example of an event. I clicked a button and an event occurred. Event-driven program. Another thing would be an example is, let's see here, I'm going to run some code. All right. So I have this program here called Welcome to Tic-Tac-Toe written in Java that I wrote. You will have an X and the computer will have an O. So you're playing against a computer. So now I'm going to click OK, and guess what happens? This screen comes up. It's called an event. So an event occurred. Enter the position where you want to play. So you pick a number. So it's like picking XO. So I'm going to pick 9. I'm going to hit OK. And what happens is, and another event occurred. It says your move is recorded. Now the computer will play. So you see it gave me an X. I click OK. Guess what happens? Computer made a move. So it chose an O there. Next thing I need to do is click OK and choose the next move. So I'm competing against the computer. That is an example of an event. Event-driven program is a program which a user might initiate any number of events in that order. Same thing. That game is an event-driven program because I'm exercising some type of right. I'm telling it where to go. So I put it next there. I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to go with a 1 over here and try to trick them. All right. Hit OK. Computer has played. They put an O there. Set perfect. All I need to do is make a 5 there, and I got this game. So now I enter a 5 in my event driven. I'm like, I got this. Guess what? Game over. Congratulations. I won. that game. Those are event-driven programs. Source, component of on which an event is generated. Source is this right here, is the source code. So this would be your source, but it's generated within the application. Listener, an object that is interested in an event. So a good example of a listener is there's one of these where I work at. We have to. I occasionally I have a full-time job where I'm an application architect, and one of the things that we work on is sometimes when we have to write programs, we have to use what's the word? Scheduling tools. So there's so many different scheduling tools out there that you could schedule a job and the job will run and whatever. But what I like to do in some of the programs, I like to write something called a Windows event. So it's basically a Windows service. So it's a service that runs on the computer like everything else that runs. And this service automatically does stuff. So what it does is this service actually listens to messages coming in. So for example, at my previous job, I developed a system that anytime that someone uses their credit card, let's say they go to the store and they swipe it, that right there is an event. Event just occurred, and then what the next thing happens is my program is a listener. It listens and says, "Hey, guess what? So and so, account number 12345 just swiped their card at Walmart in Columbus, Ohio, on this street, this date, date, time, etc." Gathers all that information, and then it goes and looks at the computer and says, "All right, now is there any other event alerts that I need to notify?" If there's alerts, sends a text message or an email based off the type of alert, and so forth. That is an example of listener. Somebody out there listening to what you're saying. It's almost like the FBI. They're listening to everything we're saying. So it's kind of like in a program, the listener is something that listens to what is coming in, and it knows that it has to do a job. That was a lot, sorry. We'll move on. Import java.auth.event package. So that talks about how you import your event. Add the phrase implements action listener to the class header. That says, hey, you know what? You're going to use an action listener. It's going to be something that once you click a button, something is going to occur on an action. So that will be something that we definitely need to consider when we're writing the program. And we'll go through some examples of that. Let's moving on here. Add action listener method. A button dot add action listener to this causes an action event messages button clicks that came from a button to be sent to the current object. So just like getting back, when you need to add the JTextField or the label, same thing here. We need to let the add action listener know that when a button, that certain button is chosen, we need to do something about it. One more. Okay, we'll skip this. Figure 1426 shows a JFrame that reacts to a button click. So what I would suggest you do is go to your computer, go to your, let's see if I can find an example in the book here. Alright, so I pulled up, I actually wrote up some code in TextFrame here that pulls up stuff that is in 1426. So it highlights, or did I highlight that? Alright, anyways, it talks about button click, import event. So here's your import event that you're porting in. You have your class name, you're extending the JFrame implements action listener. As we mentioned, you're describing your frame, what's going to be in it, label, text fill, etc. Then here's your actual class, the hello frame, which it's the size. You're calling your super, you're setting the size, you're setting your layout. You have your object question, which is up here. You're setting the font of that question in the label. You're setting the font of the greeting. And then you're adding all those things you added to your container. You're setting the default that once you close the button, it exits. Press me.add action listener means that once that button's pressed, it needs to do something. And then here's the action event down here. We have an override. We have public void action perform, action event. So when that gets clicked, guess what? It comes down here and says string name equals answer.getText, which gets the text value that the person entered in, and it'll say hello versus what that person entered in. Hello, Bob Smith. Greeting set text greet. So this is another thing. It has to be that set text has to be set even though they enter it in, and then that information will be displayed on the screen. That would be an example of this 1426. Actually, I didn't even realize that it was in my diagram. There you go. Jeez. All right. Can use multiple event sources. Can't add more than one event source to listener. 1429, if you look at it, yes, you can add more than one. Alternatively, you can use an instance of. So we have the override up here, action event object equals e.getSource. If the source equals optional, execute something else. And down here is an action performed. So yeah, you can have multiple actions. You will have multiple actions. setEnabled method makes a component unavailable and then makes available again. So setEnabled means true or false. That's a Boolean statement. Classes that respond to your user initiated events must implement an interface that deals with events called event listeners. Many types of listeners exist in Java. A class can implement as many event listeners as it needs. Understanding, excuse me, sorry. So understanding swing event listeners. I won't go through this. I'll let you read this in the book. List of listeners, types of events that happen, examples. These are good things to remember. They might be on a midterm. 37. Create a relationship between swing components and classes. Checkbox. Responds to the user clicks. Add item listener. Register to JTextFields. Once again, event listeners. Study this. You'll need to know it. Understand swing components. A class of an object that responds to an event contains a method that accepts the event object created by the user action. If a user declares a class that handles an event, create a class to do one of the following. Implement a listener interface. We'll talk about interfaces later on. Extend a class that implements a listener interface. Let's scroll down. JCheckbox consists of a label position beside a square. Checkbox is what you think it is, a little box that you check. And this right here, JCheckbox, check here, false. What do you think that means? It's not going to be shown. So here's an example of checkbox. If we have false here. So let's say that we had this value false. Guess what would happen? Only these three values would show. The other one wouldn't show. Once again, objects. You have the ability to set text, get text, set selected, Boolean value, and then select it, true or false. Your different methods here that you could talk about within the checkbox. A little bit different. Set text, set selected, and is selected. So all true or false values. Those are your arguments, true or false. You have something called a button group. Group several components so that the user can select only one at a time. So that's if you have a checkbox and say you have four options. In the checkbox, the question is, pick your favorite basketball team. You have the Cleveland Cavaliers, you have the Los Angeles Lakers, you have the Boston Celtics, and you have the Miami Heat. But you can only select one team. So if you select the Miami Heat, it will not allow you to select the other ones. Now, here's the question. Can you do that with an individual box without using button group? Yes, you can. Button group makes it easier because it's already built into the component. But if you decide not to go that route and you want to do individual checks, then what you can do is, so let's say that I select Miami Heat, for example. What I could do is, let me go back to my, see if I go back to my whiteboard. Let's see if I can remember how to create a new one. 1 second, this will make more sense. Oops. What do you think is easier? Hit that. Probably just refreshing a new one. I guess that was easier. All right, so let's go back to checkboxes. So let's say that we had, this ain't gonna be pretty, I'll tell you that right now. We'll just, oh my God, that's horrible. Let's start over. Checkbox 1, okay. Not good with the mouse and creating something. All right, so we have that one checked right there. So that's for the heat. Wow, this is bad. All right, so I saved you the time. I just put bulls and lakers to make it easier. So what we could do is we could say if object.check equals true, then if we want to select another one, we could do a conditional statement. We could use if condition statement saying that if object is already selected, then we can make sure that this one can't be selected. So we could put code behind that. But why do all that when you can just use a button group and it does it for you? So just think about that. Excuse me, I apologize. I got a cold. Create a button group, create a checkbox. These are all the same things that we've already talked about. They're doing, notice they're doing the same stuff that we've already talked about. They're, they have the name, the button group, the name of the class. You give it what you want to give it. You call it new button group. You have J checkbox, same thing. You're adding these components. These are all similar things that you have to do. There's a J combo box, same methodology. Combo box gives you options to select from. So when you click the down arrow, you're going to do selections. To build a combo box, you're going to use a constructor with no arguments and then add items with the add item. Let's see here. We'll let you read through the book on this on 14.6 different methods and purposes. I won't go through all that. J combo box, set selected items, get selected items just as you would think it would be. What did we go over? We went over JFrame, we went over buttons, text fields, boxes, etc. Set visible, so we went over different argument and parameters that you can use. Don't do things that you don't want to do. Summary, so we basically what we learned in a nutshell today is how to use different objects, the checkbox, why you use the button group, the jumbo box. We talked about JFrame, how you add objects to the frame, and so forth. So those are things that we'll talk about in the lab a little bit more, but those are also things that will be in your assignment this week. Your assignment will be something along what you learned to just make sure that you have a basic understanding of how to do this. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. I apologize for the coughing, getting over a cold, but best of luck this week. If you have any questions on the lecture, please let me know. Thank you.